Welcome to the Power Monkey Podcast, where we chat with the best in the world about what they do. We invite coaches, athletes, and industry leaders in our community who are willing to open up about their setbacks and successes to educate and inspire our listeners. I'm your host, Dave Durante, with my co-host, Chad Vaughn, and on today's episode, we have a guest that might not be someone who's familiar to many of you guys, but I think you're going to love this episode. His name is Declan Smithies. He is actually someone that we just met recently at our Power Monkey camp. He was a camper at Camp 15, and he was so unique, so interesting, and had so much to say in terms of a topic that we haven't really discussed too much, but its application to the competitive world, to being an athlete, to being in the fitness realm. We thought it was very, very applicable. He is a professor of philosophy and deals a lot with cognitive science. His book, The Epistemic Role of Consciousness, is something that we talk about a lot. He talks a lot about how to use the mind appropriately in a competitive setting, and it was amazing. He actually ended up asking me and Chad more questions than we asked him, so it was really cool to be able to give some answers in terms of what we did as athletes to be able to create a stronger mind, to be able to get the mind to work for us rather than against us. And I think for many athletes, young and old, no matter what level you're at, being able to harness the mind when you're competing is just as important as being able to harness what your body's capable of doing physically. And Declan gives us some really concrete things to be able to do. We kind of delve in pretty deeply into what goes on when you're starting to actually use the mind in a better way. So we hope you guys enjoy this one. It was a new kind of topic for us to deal with. We think there's some really great concrete take-home points for our listeners, and we hope you guys enjoy it. Hey everyone, we at Power Monkey are incredibly excited to be announcing our newest event, Camp Restore. It's going to be held in beautiful Crossville, Tennessee, and the dates are going to be September 21st through the 25th. Yes, this location is the same as where we host our Power Monkey camp, but this is something completely new and unique for us, something we've never hosted before. The offering is going to be much different. Some of the classes are going to include yoga, dance, cardio, partner aerial classes, meditation, cooking, as well as some nutrition seminars and lectures. We're bringing some incredible lecturers and clinicians to be able to work with you. Now, if you want to jump into the sessions, we want you to do it, but also give yourselves an opportunity to take advantage of nature, being in the middle of our 150-acre campus, away from the stresses of life, and just explore what we have to offer. The trails, paddleboarding, kayaking, enjoying the lake, tackling our high ropes course that we have on campus. It really is an incredible location. We'll also be taking some field trips to some amazing waterfalls that are in the general area. You guys will absolutely love this one. It's going to be a new offering that Power Monkey is bringing to the table for the first time. If you're looking to sign up, you can go to powermonkeyfitness.com for more information under the events tab. And please try to take advantage of our early bird rate, which is going on now through June 15th. Again, that's powermonkeyfitness.com under our events tab to check out more on Camp Restore. All right, well, Declan, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. You know, you're a unique guest for us, being that we just met you fairly recently at our Power Monkey campus a couple of weeks ago, and I'd love for our listeners to get a better understanding of what your background is, where you came from, and why you are going to be such a great guest for us today. So would you mind just jumping into a little bit of your background?
Absolutely, and thanks so much for the invitation to join you guys today. So I guess there's kind of two sides to me. My kind of professional side, I'm a philosophy professor at the Ohio State University. My academic background is I got my bachelor's degree from Oxford, and then I came over to the United States as a 21-year-old, got my PhD at New York University. And I work on issues in the philosophy of mind, so topics like consciousness and attention and introspection. So I recently published a book on consciousness, and I've edited a couple of volumes on attention and introspection. So that's the kind of professional side. But going back to my youth, I did a lot of sports in high school. In fact, competitive judo was my passion, and I was actually on the British team for a few years there. But while pursuing my PhD and then while working as an academic philosopher, I unfortunately let fitness take a back seat in my life. And I've just been able to rediscover it during the pandemic and had a pretty major life transformation, which I'd love to talk to you guys about. And that's what brought me in contact with Power Monkey, which has really kind of boosted me and given me direction for the next phase of my training.
Wow, that's amazing. So, I mean, obviously, the judo side of it, you also understand some high level competitive stuff. You did it for a number of years. You competed for Britain and everything like that on the judo side. So you have an idea of what it takes to be able to apply some of what your teachings are to the elite, the high level athlete. With regards to camp and how you found us, can you just delve a little bit deeper into this past year? Because I know it was formative for you in terms of where you are right now. Can you just talk about what happened during the pandemic and how you came to be kind of your current fit self?
Absolutely. I'd love to talk about that. So it's just been a really a life-changing experience. But winding the clock back a little bit, as I say, I mean, I put all of my focus on my career through my 20s and 30s. And I would try to work out. And so occasionally I'd do a workout, but there was no consistency. And my health was gradually declining. I was diagnosed with gout, which is an illness that's associated with medieval kings. I mean, there's no reason why someone in the 21st century should have gout, and yet I did. And I was gradually, my biometrics were getting worse year by year. My waist size was gradually increasing until the beginning of the pandemic. I had a 40-inch waist size, which my doctor wasn't happy about. Something about the pandemic just enabled me to reset. So very early on, my wife and I had a discussion where we decided, you know what, we're going to be stuck at home for the year. Let's move our dining room table into a corner and let's turn our dining room into a yoga studio. So we started out with a 30-day yoga challenge. And that was all I could do because I was incredibly immobile, not very strong, not very fit. But just establishing that routine of working out every day and establishing a baseline of mobility and fitness set me up to do more. So once that constellation of habits were formed, they just cascaded. So I was able to start bodyweight exercises. A friend of mine lent me 35-pound dumbbells. I was out in the back garden doing what I guess were WODs, although I didn't know it, workouts of the day. And I was building a bit of strength. Soon, I felt like the 35-pound dumbbells weren't heavy enough. So I bought a weight kit from Walmart, one of the great American institutions, 210-pound weight set. I didn't really know what to do with it. I mean, I was there on my bench without a rack trying to bench press it. And I realized, look, I've got to figure out what's going on here. So I started doing research and found Mark Ripeto's Starting Strength. And it's just been a journey from there. So I went through linear progression, doubled and tripled my squat, bench press, and deadlift, and then realized I didn't know how to power clean. There were power cleans programmed into Starting Strength. And I'm like, well, how the hell do I do this? And so I enrolled for a 3-month online weightlifting course with Drew Dillon at Project Lift, which was a wonderful experience. And working with him, I realized, well, look, there are foundational issues in mobility that I need to work on. And he actually recommended doing some gymnastics training. So I signed up for Christopher Summers' Gymnastics Bodies. So it's just been this incredible experience. I mean, physically, my body's changed. My waist size went from a 40 to a 31 in just the course of a few months. I dropped 30 pounds while building quite a lot of muscle. So the amount of fat that I must have burned, I don't even know. But more importantly than that, I've gotten in touch with a part of myself that I'd lost touch with. And having exercise as now a kind of integral part of my life is so inspiring. And I see it inspiring people around me. So it's just been a wonderful experience. It's regrettable that it shouldn't have taken a global pandemic to get me off my backside, but it did.
So, I mean,
Go ahead, Chad.
Just saying, there's been so many blessings from the pandemic, and this is certainly one really good example of that. And talking about, what you've been through there and what you've been able to accomplish really in a short period of time speaks to your dedication and your talents as an athlete. And, us coaches at Power Monkey Camp, we just saw you there. We can see that you're a talented athlete and you're doing good, man. You're looking good. And in fact, you actually threatened me that you are now in my weight class, the 73 kilo weight class. And I think we're close enough in age where we might have to go face to face.
That's right. It might take me about 20 years to catch up with you, Chad. But once we're into our 60s and 70s, you better watch out because I'll still be coming.
Hey, it's all about lasting, right? If you can outlast me, then that's there you go. You got it.
Well, it was awesome to see, Declan, too. You mentioned to us never having done CrossFit prior to coming to camp. You did your first WOD while you were at camp. But what's so cool is, I saw you during open gym time, you were kicking up, you were working on your handstands, you were working on so many things that I could tell were new for you, but there was such a level of engagement and such a level of, not only do I want to get the most out of every day that I'm here, but excitement and enjoyment. And, that's what we kind of hope to see from someone that finds these things later in life, to be able to say, wow, like, not only can this bring my waistline down, but it's something that if I do correctly, I'll be able to do for longevity, for the rest of my life. And to be able to, I think most people get the misconception that coming to camp means you have to already be an elite athlete. And you're a perfect example of someone that came to camp, and we are trying to basically help build your foundation so that you can build off of that correctly. And so I just was in awe of the way that you approached camp, especially in the enthusiasm, especially having never done a lot of the things that we were kind of throwing at you throughout the week. So thank you for being a great example for future campers that are in a similar boat.
Hey, I really appreciate that. Maybe I could just say two things about that. One is that I think there's a lot of people in my boat, because when things started, I was basically having to coach myself. Mm-hmm. And there's a whole community of people on the internet, body weight warriors and so on, who are in effect teaching themselves gymnastics, and who I think would jump at the chance to kind of learn in a more formal setting. I think those people would really get a ton out of Power Monkey Camp. The other thing I wanted to say is just, because my way in is different. I mean, probably the majority of people at the camp are CrossFitters, and that's their way in. My route in was a little different, perhaps, from the average. But I want to just comment on how inclusive the environment at Power Monkey Camp is. Some of the coaches could tell. I mean, for example, Chris Hinshaw could tell I wasn't doing a ton of cardio. And I made a kind of joke to Chris about, I hope he's not going to kind of kick my ass. He could tell that although I was joking, there was a genuine fear lying beneath the joke. And he's very cognizant of that in the way he teaches. And the same is true for other coaches at Power Monkey. They know that there are people there who are asking, do I belong? Mm-hmm. And the fact is, everyone is made to feel welcome. Almost every coach knows everyone else's name by the end of the first day, which is astonishing. And so it's just it's just a wonderful environment to be a part of. I'm so grateful that I was able to participate in it.
Yeah, man, we're so
thankful for that.
Yeah, we're so thankful that you were there. I mean, we're thankful that every camper was there. I mean, it really, we don't say this lightly, that each person truly becomes a part of the family, and that's the way that we feel about everyone. That's the way that we feel about you, Declan. And having those conversations with you that I was fortunate enough to have with you, as you were in my station, and as we sat down to eat together a couple times and everything else, and then at the party on Friday night, anything that I said just wasn't because I was drinking a little bit, man. You know what I'm saying? Just make sure you understand that. But I'm excited to talk to you today, not only about your experiences at camp that we've talked a little bit about already, and I've got some questions for you later on, but the bulk of why you're on here today is to talk about philosophy and the function of consciousness. And I'm just excited, so excited to talk to you about these things and get your perspective on, how we can use that in our sports and gymnastics, weightlifting, and CrossFit, and how we can use that as teachers as well. And I wonder first, and I don't wonder because I know you can do this, but can you just define philosophy for us? Just give us a definition of what that is exactly and what it means to you.
Yeah, it's actually not an easy thing to do, to give a definition of philosophy. I mean, the way I would put it is that philosophy is the study of really foundational questions. So I think in every discipline, take physics, for example, at the foundations of that discipline are theoretical physicists. And the work that theoretical physicists are doing is continuous with the work that philosophers of physics are doing. The same is true in psychology. So in psychology, or for that matter, linguistics, you get thinkers like Noam Chomsky, who is very much a theoretician. And the kind of work that Chomsky is doing and has done in the past is continuous with the work that philosophers of mind and philosophers of language do. So philosophy is really the study of foundational questions. And the cool thing is, there are foundational questions about anything you want to think about. So there are questions in the philosophy of sport, and I hope we'll discuss some of those. There are questions in the philosophy of language. There are questions in the philosophy of music. But basically, if you're a reflective person and you're kind of thinking about the questions of life and the questions of reality and how we know about it, you will be ineluctably drawn into doing philosophy, whether you like it or not.
So what you're saying is that we can have a conversation right now and solve the world's problems right here and now, right? Is that what we're going to do?
Through the squat.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, please, let's no, that's too much for me. I can't handle, digging into the philosophy of the squat today. I just can't do that. It's too much. It's what I do every day, right? But
that's right.
Talking about the consciousness, that part of philosophy, and specifically for sport or for something like weightlifting, something like gymnastics. If we have to talk about gymnastics today, Declan, I guess we will. But
we are definitely.
You talk about in some stuff that you've written, conscious vision and unconscious vision. Can you explain, what that is and what the differences are there?
Yeah, so my work is all about the function of consciousness. And the reason this is an interesting question is that more and more we're learning from neuroscience and psychology that a great many of the functions of the mind are performed unconsciously. I mean, in a way, this has been known since Freud. Of course, Freud was the great discoverer of the unconscious. The particular things that Freud said about the unconscious, Oedipal complexes and all the rest, have been pretty much debunked. But the core idea that there is an unconscious part to the mind that explains a lot of what we do is just very well confirmed by scientific work in psychology and neuroscience. And so, for example, one condition that I study is blind sight. So people with blind sight, as a result of a stroke, have damage in the visual cortex, which is an area of the brain in the back of your head here. And they think they've gone completely blind. But if you present a stimulus to them and ask them to guess what it is, they can actually give you the right answer. So if you say, what is it? They'll say, I don't know, you're asking the wrong person, I'm blind. And yet if you say, well, just have a guess, they can tell you, for example, whether it's a letter X or a letter O. And they're surprised when they find out that they're giving you the right answer. Now, how are they doing it? How are they succeeding in doing it? The answer is they're using unconscious vision. We have not only conscious vision, where we form a clear picture of an object, but we have unconscious vision too. And it's playing a massively important role in our lives. And in particular, it's playing a massively important role in sport.
Yeah, and you Yeah, go ahead.
Chad.
I was just going to say,
I want to just touch on that a little. Sorry. I know we're going to do this all day because both of us want to get in questions here. But just with regards to that particular example, because it seems confusing, right? Yeah. What is actually playing out with this blind sight person with unconscious vision? Like, if they're not able to actually see it, what is allowing them to? Is it an odd situation where they've played out so many things in their head a certain amount of times that it's most likely this, and it's kind of leading them to a particular answer? What is it that's allowing them to get a right answer in a situation where they actually can't see it?
If you ask them, why did you guess, let's say, X rather than an O? They'll tell you, I don't know, I'm just guessing. But if you want to know why they're getting the right answer, the answer is there's some kind of reptilian part of the brain, some subcortical part of the brain, not involving the cortex at all, which is processing this information. So if you think about it in evolutionary terms, think about the way a frog, for example, is able to catch a fly with its tongue. It's using some fairly primitive visuomotor system. It's using visual information to control where its tongue reaches out to grab the frog. And that's all happening automatically and unconsciously. And we have within us, they're sometimes called zombie systems, but these unconscious systems that control our action. So what the blindsighter is basically doing is using that reptilian part of the brain, that frog-like part of the brain. And we all use it, but we're of course not aware of how much we're using it in our day-to-day lives. This does raise an interesting question. I mean, if unconscious vision is doing so much, what's the point of conscious vision? And I think actually conscious vision is playing important roles too, albeit slightly different roles from unconscious vision. We could talk about that.
Yeah, go ahead, Chad.
Yeah, you gave a great example of playing baseball.
Yeah.
And can you just go over that a little bit? Because I think that'll help give a little bit of a better understanding of what you're talking about and how this, conscious and unconscious vision is being used.
Exactly. So yeah, this is a great example to think about. If you're playing baseball or tennis at the top level, how long does it take for the ball to reach you from your opponent's racket or from the pitcher's hand? Less than half a second. I mean, 400 milliseconds, even slightly less. It's incredibly quick. How are you able to react so quickly? Well, you might think what you're doing is forming a clear, focused picture of the ball as it approaches, and you're using that clear picture to then strike the ball. That can't be what's happening because it's too slow. It takes about 400 milliseconds for the visual system to form a clear, focused picture of the image. So from the time the light hits the retina, there's information that then needs to be processed through several hierarchies of processing in the brain, and that takes time. It takes close to half a second. So if you wait to form a conscious visual image, it's too late. The ball's already past you. So what's going on instead is you must be using unconscious vision. You must be using unconscious vision. But nevertheless, that doesn't mean conscious vision is doing nothing. You need to be paying attention in the right place. So you need to, why do coaches tell you to watch the ball? Not because that enables you to form this clearly focused picture of the object, which then guides your action. But rather, if you're not directing attention in the right place, your unconscious system is not going to know where to home in on. It's not going to have these cues to draw upon.
Now, from where I'm understanding, I'm trying to apply it to a gymnastics skill work or routine that we might do. And I find there's a lot of parallels in the way that, when I get a question about, how do you do a skill when you release from the bar and do 2 flips over the bar and with a full twist and then catch the bar again, there are so many complex things that are happening in such a short period of time. How do you figure that all out? And obviously it's about progression, right? It's about doing the preceding step correctly, learning and building upon that foundation and getting to the point. And this is what my question has to do with repetition and the importance of repetition, because most gymnasts, and I would say that probably any elite athlete, will get to a point within their sport where they've done something so many times that I feel like the unconscious vision takes over, because your body starts to recognize movement patterns and start to recognize that my body will naturally move in that way correctly because I've done it so many ways. So in my mind, unconscious vision seems to be something that's learned. It's not something that's innate. It's something that you can actually learn over time through repetition. And then the second part to that is, to me, there's a slowing down effect that happens. Like on super complex movements, I always felt like my body was moving very slowly in something that to the natural eye would happen instantaneously. And I was able to make adjustments and make corrections, many of them in what other people would look at as a blink of the eye. And I felt like that was through repetition and through being able to, okay, my body is within space. I know exactly where I am. I know what adjustments to anticipate to make. And it seems like that's the unconscious vision, learning the skill that I'm trying to pursue. Does that make sense? And would you agree that the unconscious vision is something that can be taught and learned and become better at?
Absolutely. And so interesting to hear your perspective as a gymnastic athlete and coach. And I'd love to hear more about this. I mean, my sense is that there are 2 components to this. So one component is getting the visual information you need. So in the cricket example, that's like, or the baseball example, knowing where to look so that you're picking up the cues you need. The other component is not getting the information you need, but using the information you're getting in the right kind of way. And it seems to me that the importance of repetition and training comes in the latter way. It's sort of being able to then use the information you're getting. But one thing I've noticed sort of working with both of you at camp, you both emphasize the importance of focusing vision in a certain way. So when you're doing a handstand, it's very important that you're directing your vision between your hands. When you're performing a squat or a clean and jerk, it's again very important where you direct your vision. And that's something that I haven't been doing correctly. Why is this so important? I take it because that enables you to then receive the information that you need to perform the technique. And now I'm at the point where I need to go through this process of repetitive training to be able to use that information more effectively. As a novice, I'm still having to kind of break the skills down into their component parts. But I take it one thing that repetitive training will give you is that ability to stop focusing on the components of the skills and to use that information more seamlessly.
I agree 100%. Chad, I want to get your take on it too, but I agree with you 100%. And it seems like, I guess, to verbalize this a little bit more, when you're learning a skill, you have to rely more on conscious vision, less on unconscious. And as you become more competent, more repetitions involved, you start to shift more towards unconscious vision, less on conscious vision. As an example, I was telling you where to have your eye line on your handstand, right? Because when you're learning, having a visual contact point really allows you to find balance more easily. But if you work with, someone at a very high level, if you get to the point where you're working on one-handed handstands or really complex handstand movements, you'll find that you can do handstands with your eyes closed, with head in totally different positions, because you don't have to rely on that visual contact point nearly as much because your body naturally takes over. And I'm curious if, Chad, if you've ever tried to do a lift with your eyes closed, or if you've ever tried to do something like that before and let the movement pattern take over, or if that's something that really would serve no purpose in your mind. We play around like that with gymnastics. Like, let me see if I can do the skill with my eyes closed. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah, I was just going to bring that up. And the interesting part about that is that I've really thought a lot about that as I've taught and coached in the community longer and longer, and just wondering if there would be benefit to having people close their eyes, or me experimenting with that myself and doing snatches and clean and jerks or squats with my eyes closed. And I don't know why I haven't, but I just haven't experimented with that. And maybe this is enough motivation to do that, because really, ultimately, what I try to teach people is, especially for weightlifting, I don't want you to put energy and effort into thinking about what you're seeing in front of you. Yes, I'm going to put your eyes in a specific spot, but I don't want that to direct your effort away and for you to be where your consciousness is, right?
Yeah.
I want you feeling your way through the lift. So if I want you to feel your way through the lift, then maybe I could have someone shut their eyes and just really try to feel what's going on as they're in the start position, as they're squatting, from the start position, as they're moving through the rest of the lift. What does that feel like? Because if their eyesight, if what they're seeing is taking away from that, then maybe I could have someone close their eyes to help teach them what I'm trying to get them to accomplish. The way that I'm trying to get them to focus is to feel their way through the lift. Now, the importance of putting someone's eyes somewhere, though, for a snatch or for a clean, it's about positioning. It's about positioning the head, and it's about positioning the body. If you're looking straight up at the ceiling, and you're zoned in on that, you're focused in on that, well, that's going to create some kinks in the body. That's not going to allow you to lift the most weight that you can. For Olympic lifting purposes, if you're looking straight down at the ground, again, that's going to create some kinks. But we also have to remember that the body tends to follow the eyes and the head, right? So where you direct them is very important, even for something like weightlifting. But if I have your head positioned in the right place, then why can't we close our eyes and snatch as much weight? I mean, I don't know. I've never tried it, and I don't think anyone has ever really done those experiments to say that's the case. But if you're going to lift the most weight that you can in a snatch, I believe by feeling your way through the lift, by putting so much of your effort and energy on feeling, then his eyesight really matter in that moment. I wonder what your thought is on that, Declan.
Yeah, I mean, there's no particular reason why vision should play the same role in every sport. So partly what I wanted to ask you guys is, what kind of role is vision playing in gymnastics and weightlifting? It's pretty clear in baseball and tennis. You're not going to get off the starting line if you have your eyes closed. Unconscious vision can't operate unless you're getting that information. It may well be that vision just doesn't play such an important role in gymnastics and weightlifting. It would be really fun to test this. It would be fun to actually, get people lifting and doing routines with vision and without vision. By the way, they've done similar things in baseball and cricket. So they do, for example, they put lenses on which blur your vision. And amazingly, they found that for cricketers, and cricket basically works pretty similarly to baseball, it doesn't affect people's ability to hit the ball because the unconscious system doesn't need super focused information in order to react appropriately to the ball. So basically wearing blurry vision glasses doesn't affect performance that much. And I think cricketers themselves find that extremely surprising. It would be fun to sort of test whether putting on blinders makes a difference to gymnastics.
My recommendation here would be, and my suggestion was more for elite people and not as beginners. And I just want to make that clear. This is not like someone who's doing a handstand for the first time, suddenly close your eyes and expect miracles to happen. This is for someone that has that unconscious vision in place. They've moved pretty closely to being able to effectively put unconscious vision into their movement, and then see if they can feel a lot of the same cues and a lot of the same positions without needing that eye line. I think, Chad, you're exactly correct. Like, you use eye line as a setup for position, for form. We do the same thing in gymnastics. Now, when you're learning, teaching someone, absolutely. But for you, your body naturally goes there. You know exactly, like, I have a hard time believing that your head's going to be looking up at the ceiling when you're about to take bar off the ground. Right. So for you, I would say this would be interesting test for you. Maybe not someone that you program for or working with, but more the teacher and the elite athlete rather than someone who's kind of learning from scratch.
Yeah, I think it's probably more important for gymnastics, as you said. And, maybe if I do experiments, it should be with myself first. But I'm not sure that I know I can't say with 100% certainty that I may not come across a person or a lot of people that would be able to learn a snatch or a clean or a jerk better by closing their eyes. Because for a lot of athletes, and I think we're going to talk about this a little bit here as well, overthinking versus underthinking, that kind of thing. I talk about that all the time, and it's a big part of what I teach. And so many people overthink so much, and they are letting what they're looking at direct their attention away from the movement too much and feeling the way through, that I think some people might learn better if they close their eyes.
Interesting.
So again, it's not something that I've experimented with, but it's definitely an interesting thought. And I don't know if I've got the time to put into that right now with everything else that I'm working on. But maybe we'll have a segment at Power Monkey Camp at some point where we play with that a little bit. It's
interesting you bring that up. I actually, Declan, I don't know if you remember, but as part of the warm up that I run on Tuesday, I do a little example of this. It's not for maybe it probably has more application than what we're talking about now, but I do it for the purposes of understanding using a visual contact point to help with balance. I have people do a scale. So we, as part of the warm-up chat, I don't know if you've seen me do this before, but just lifting one leg off the ground and trying to hold it at their peak point for 10 seconds, trying to use a visual contact point out on the ground. It's normally fairly challenging, but doable for most people. And then I have them do the same thing with their eyes closed and to see whether or not they're able to do it. And almost universally, people are falling over, stumbling, not able to hold nearly as well. And the point that I'm trying to make with that is the importance of using visual contact points to assist in finding balance. When you close your eyes, what you'll notice is you'll notice a lot more gripping of the toes into the ground. You'll notice a lot more of what your arms are doing in terms of how to find balance. Other systems start to seem to take over in place of your visual capacity, which is really, really interesting on more of a simple movement. But the same could be said as you start moving it towards more challenging movements.
Yeah, that's so interesting. That was exactly my experience. I was able to basically balance with the eyes open, but not closed. So let me ask you this. So I'm completely prepared to believe that a high-level gymnast could continue to exercise their routines at a high level without using vision. I wanted to ask you guys about a different kind of aspect of consciousness, so conscious cognition, as opposed to conscious perception, or that is thought or reasoning. So that when people talk about, going back to this idea that experts have training to rely on, so they don't need to think about the components of their skills. It's clear that there's a danger of thinking too much at that point. If you start thinking about the components of your skills rather than relying on your training, it can actually undermine your movement. And in the worst cases, it might lead to something like the yips, where these poor golfers are struggling to execute their swing. But I wonder, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, is there a danger of thinking too little? I mean, there's a school of thought that says when you do sport, you should just do it. You should empty your mind. You should be in this Zen state where you're not in any way thinking about what you're doing at all. And to my mind, that doesn't fit with, when I watch you, Dave, at the Olympic trials on YouTube, I watch those videos, you seem incredibly focused. You're clearly concentrating on what you're doing. You're engaging conscious attention in what you're doing. Why is that so important? And it's likewise in weightlifting. Why is it important to focus your attention? And when you focus your attention, how do you focus it? What are the pitfalls?
This question in of itself is super complex. And I think the answer is maybe slightly different for each athlete. Thinking too much was my big problem in the sport. So it was something that I always tried to figure out ways to overcome. And different coaches had different approaches to it. There are different ways to be able to get on the competition floor and be able to feel like you are 100% prepared. And I think the goal is to be able to get into that zone, right? That point where your body naturally takes over. But I don't think it happens by thinking less. I don't think you get into that zone by thinking less. To me, the most effective way to be able to get to that point of body naturally taking over was in the gym through repetition. And by doing something and recreating the competition setting so many times over and over again that your body naturally knew exactly what it was supposed to do. So when you get to that setting, no matter if the crowd is 10 people or the whole world watching, your body is going to do the exact same thing that you do on a daily basis in the gym. And that's what gave me confidence to be able to say, I'm going to succeed in this situation, no matter what the pressure is. I did have athletes that I was envious of, that I trained with, that seemed to think less, that seemed to not be affected by the moment, or not be affected by the what if that doesn't go according to what I have planned out in my head. And I wasn't like that. I would always, my biggest obstacle was failing the people that helped me get to that point. So I was always trying to compete for other people's, to show them that I succeeded in the way that they helped me get to that point, to show that all of their sacrifices kind of were coming to fruition for me. And so I was always worried about letting people down. But there are people that those things don't even come into their minds. They just get in the competition floor and they're able to recreate what they do in the gym on a very regular basis. And so I was envious of those people that said they could shut their mind off in some ways and just go and do the routine. Mine wasn't like that. Mine was through repetition. So how did I get to that point of being able to stay focused, be in the moment, be clear-headed when it counted? Mine was through, I've done this a million times. I know exactly what I have to do. Now it's time to execute.
That's so interesting. Chad, I wonder if I could put the question to you too, because I've been reading your station notes. And I know that one bit of advice you give to us is when you're performing a lift, have 3 things. Just think about 3 things as you perform the lift. If you try to think about 10 things, you're not going to succeed in keeping track of all 10 things, and it's going to go wrong. But you shouldn't lift in a completely mindless way. You should actually be thinking about what you're doing, at least in that very limited way. So the question I have for you and also for Dave is whether that then applies to elite performance. When you're performing at the Olympic trials or in the Olympic Games, do you also have 3 things that you're thinking about, or are you at such an advanced level that actually that isn't needed?
It's a great question, and it's one I'm scared to even start to answer because I love this stuff so much, and beyond the squat, it's probably my second favorite thing to teach is how to focus through a lift, or how I think you should focus through a lift. And 3 things, if I'm going to make that recommendation of that specific number, and that's what I believe it should be for anyone to perform a snatch or a clean to the best of their ability. For a jerk, I think it can be 2 and should be optimally. I think it's critical at the most elite level to maintain your movement and to execute as effectively as you want, that it is three things. To learn the lift in the first place, I think it's critical for it to be three and only three things. That's a skill though, as well. Like, you have to think of that as a skill. It takes time to develop the skill of focusing. And I think if you're going to develop a skill in weightlifting, more importantly than understanding and learning the technique is, I think, from the get-go, developing the skill of focusing. And focusing in weightlifting means feeling those three cues that I'm talking about here. But talking about a Zen state or being in the zone, to me, that's not an automatic thing. I think, that the way that you put yourself there is learning this skill and applying this skill. In weightlifting specifically, it's feeling your way through the lift with three cues. And that indicates that there is a certain line that you don't want to cross in either direction. You don't want to underthink and you don't want to overthink. And if you're on either side of that line, whatever that line is for you, maybe it is a little different for different people, then you're not going to be as zoned in as you could be. You're not going to execute to the best of your ability. So I think you can learn to put yourself in the zone. And the more that you learn that skill of feeling your way through the lift, and the more that you do that, the less you're going to be distracted by, I want to do good for my family. Like Dave said, I was very, very guilty of that as well. So not only do I think that athletes tend to very often overthink, very often underthink, but they inappropriately think as well. So if I'm thinking about what my family is going to feel if I don't do well, well, that's inappropriate thinking. That's taking my attention away from being in the moment, from being in the zone. And so it goes back to learning the skill of feeling your way through the lift and being good at that. I am a better competitor than I've ever been at this point in my life because I have that skill, and to the point to where it doesn't matter if I have confidence on a given day. It really doesn't. It doesn't matter if I even want to pick up that weight from the floor. I mean, there's times when I was training for Worlds in 2019, I had the goals of winning the world championships and breaking world records. And there were times when in training where, I need to lift this much weight today. So I'm physically prepared, but I don't want to. I don't want to do it because I'm 39 years old and I've done it for over 20 years and I don't care to lift this weight today. But all I had to do was snap my fingers and turn on the skill that I have of focusing through a lift. And there you go. I made the lift, just because I could flip that switch and I had that ability to do that. And so that's why I'm so adamant about people, one, squatting the way that I want them to squat, but two, learning the skill of focusing through the lift. And learning to squat the way that I want you to squat has so much to do with focusing, because we're talking about preparing your body to receive a snatch and a clean. And so when I say focus through a lift, I want you to focus through a lift without any of that thought, that conscious thought being on worrying about receiving the lift. So you're going to put all of your effort and energy on three things within the pull of the lift, and then you're going to let your body react. And when you react, you want your reception to be a good reaction, but it can only be the best reaction it can be if your squat is prepared. And I'll leave it at that, or I'll keep going all day.
I mean, to my mind, that's very reminiscent of the advice to a cricketer or a baseball player to focus their attention on the ball or even the pitcher's hand and not to the mechanics of their movement. Why? Because the mechanics of that's a reactive movement. Mm-hmm. And you need the unconscious systems to take care of that, to rely on the training that you've established through repetitive practice. But it seems like for those unconscious systems to operate effectively, you do need to start by focusing attention on the object you're trying to hit, because otherwise you're not going to get the cues you need. So maybe it's not a perfect analogy, but it does seem striking that as you perform a clean, presumably you're, I still have a question for you here, Chad, but certainly for me, I am supposed to focus my attention on the start position. If I don't do that, I don't think about how I set up, then it's all going to go to hell pretty quickly. But I'm not supposed to think about the reactive part of the movement. There, I need to rely on my unconscious systems. But I guess I have a lingering question for both of you, which is that once you reach elite levels of performance, clearly you need to sort of stop thinking about family and expectations, but do you still in any way think about any cues at all? Do you, for example, need to think about your setup? Dave, as you perform a routine, are there any particular points that you concentrate on as you start that routine?
Yeah.
Or do you really just empty your mind?
No, it's actually another good point. I was going to bring it up when Chad was talking about his 3 points. And if you watch those routines, you're watching on YouTube and you see my face before the routine, you'll always see me mouthing something to myself right before I go. Yeah. And every routine that I would do had a verbal cue that went along with that routine. It was kind of the fuse to start the routine. And it was different for everyone, but I simplified it to just one cue to represent the entire routine. So it would give me the ability to say, okay, what is my real focus point here? Instead of saying we had 10 skills in each of the 6 routines that we had to perform, aside from vault, which is just, getting over the table. You had 10 skills, each one more complex than the next, very, very challenging stuff to do. If we had to focus on every individual skill, it would be impossible. We'd be all over the place. It'd be falls and be mistakes. So the goal was to say, okay, what's the objective of this routine? What's going to allow me to maximize this performance? So as an example, on pommel horse, it was speed in my circles. So I would say swing aggressive. That was my cue before I went to make sure that all of the other things clicked. That was my initial verbal cue. On floor, it was aggressive or tight punch. When I took off from the floor, I had to make sure that I was as tight as possible, so I reacted at the right timing. So each routine had just a simple verbal cue that was kind of the fuse to get me into the routine, and from there, the body took over.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So, I mean, what I take from this is that if you try to make the conscious system do all the work, if you overthink it and you think about every component of the skill, it's gonna screw you up.
Disaster.
Yep. And if you think about the wrong things, it's going to screw you up. If you're not thinking about the particular cue you want to focus on, but expectations, that's going to screw you up. But if you just go in kind of in a completely casual way, without even thinking about the key cue you need to execute, my guess is that would impair performance. So it seems to me that part of the skill that's being learned is how to focus conscious attention. It does need to be focused. But exactly how to do it in an optimal way is a very difficult skill to learn.
I've heard some people talk about this, but asking, do you get nervous before you compete? And elite athletes saying, well, I always get, some butterflies, and it's more excitement than it is nerves. If you don't have that, then you're not prepared or you're not going to execute. That's basically telling me that you're not thinking about anything. You're not even present in the moment. And I feel like there needs to be a little bit of that excitement to help you focus on the task at hand. Chad, did you feel that kind of excitement when you were competing, or was this a sense, when you were super prepared that you were just going out there and, you didn't have to think about anything at all?
Yeah, there's always some fear. The longer I competed and, especially when I came out of the slump that I was in for a number of years and kind of had to relearn how to compete and everything else and came out better on the other side, more and more of that fear went away. I had more and more confidence that I was going to be able to perform no matter what, but there's always fear there. And like you say, if there's not, then, I'm not sure that you're going to really put as much effort or energy into it, and even on those times what I was talking about, I didn't want to lift those weights. Well, there's still some fear there because I still don't want to miss it. I don't want to drop it on my head or anything else like that. So I know that I'm going to give the sufficient energy that I need, but lost my thought there. But, talking about what we're talking about here and
before you move on, Chad, I want you to answer the same question he just asked me with regards to preparation for a lift. Was there anything that you went through that kind of got the ball rolling for a particular, whether that be, your third snatch or whatever it is? Is there something different between each of the lifts or between clean and jerk to snatch? What was the kind of mindset or verbal cues that you had? Was anything there that you remember?
Yeah. Thanks, Dave. That's where I was wanting to head right there. So I appreciate you saving me like you have many times. But What I found worked for me and what works for me when I'm, sitting in a chair, or I don't ever really sit in competition anymore. I'm always up walking around, but I'm really trying to take my mind off the lifts as much as I can. I don't think that necessarily works for anyone, but we have to find the appropriate level. For me, I don't want to dwell on it. I know that I've gotten in enough reps in training that and I have the skill of flipping the switch and turning it on and feeling my way through the lift. So the more I dwell on that, the more energy it's going to take away from me. So I'm really trying to consciously take my mind somewhere else. I'm thinking about, the few beers I'm going to have after I'm done, or what I'm going to eat for dinner, purposely trying to take my mind away. And I do that with my athletes that I coach in competition as well, because I can see when they're thinking too much before the lift, it's doing more damage than good. Even if they're trying to um, visualize, I don't think that that's always such a great thing, because sometimes that can turn more negative than positive. So just trying to take their mind away. And that's what I'm doing when I'm walking up to the bar and chalking and kind of walking to the platform, is I'm delaying that, right? I'm trying to procrastinate that, so to speak, for as long as I can. And then when it comes time, when I'm walking to the bar and I reach down and grab it, now it's time to turn it on and say, okay, this is what I got to do. But there is absolutely 100% intention in the way that I set up. And that is developed through habit for sure. Like, I'm going to try to set up the same way in training as much as I can. Now, there's also a part of training where I'll put myself on a clock to where I have to go up and I have to do the lift very quickly, just in case that happens in competition. But for the most part, it's very routine. So I'm very intentional about the way that I'm setting up. And then I'm very intentional about the few, not really word cues, but again, feeling cues. Now, I use words to describe what I'm feeling, or I use words to get the athlete to understand what I want them to feel. Yeah, those are word cues, but it's more about feeling cues. And that's what I want people to understand, is that I want you to use these words to execute the action that I want you to feel within the lift. And it's on key positions. I talked at camp, trying to work out this example a little bit better, trying to tell it in different ways. But I talked about the automation of driving. When you're driving, Declan, I think you even said something similar in some of your writing, but the automation of driving is that I know that I'm going from point A to point B. I'm leaving home, and I use driving to Power Monkey Camp as an example. I got to get in my car and start it. I've got to head towards the highway, but ultimately, in the back of my mind, I've programmed in that I'm going to Power Monkey Camp. That's my end result. My end result for a snatch is getting the weight overhead, standing up, getting the down signal, and then dropping it, right? But I've got to get in my car. I've got to start it up. I've got to ease through town to get to the highway. That's just like initiating a lift. Once I get on the highway, I need to direct myself to that next exit that I need to take, the next major exit that I need to take. But I'm not sitting there thinking about driving the whole time. And I've done this just to see what it's like. So what is my body actually doing when I'm driving? And I'm thinking of my hands on the steering wheel, and what my hands are doing is they're just constantly stabilizing the steering wheel to keep it straight. And when I did that the first time, it took me like an hour to stop thinking about that, right? So I was driving myself crazy because I could not stop thinking about what my hands were doing. And I don't even remember how I eventually got my mind off of it, but I'm not thinking about that, right? Unless you make yourself do it, which I think you should, just so you understand more what I'm talking about here. But driving, you stabilizing the steering wheel and even pushing the gas is automatic, but you better be paying attention to the next exit that you need to be taking, right?
Right.
That's what I'm doing with focus. I'm setting myself up on the appropriate path to get to the next position that I need to exit off on. And then I got to get off on another exit. And then I got to get off on another exit to ultimately end up at camp, right? So I'm making sure that I'm very conscious about taking those exits, because if I don't direct myself appropriately, then there's going to be lots of compensations. It's going to take me longer to get to camp. If I miss an exit, right? If I exit at the wrong time, either too soon or too late, the movement is not going to be as effective and as efficient as it could be. Again, I'm not going to get to camp as efficiently as I would if I was paying attention and took the appropriate exits.
Yeah, I really like the driving example because everyone's, of course, had the experience where they're on autopilot and find themselves kind of falling into a familiar habit, like they're supposed to be going to the gym and end up driving to work instead, or you're driving to a new destination, you forget to take your exit. And so, as you say, Chad, you don't have to be kind of attending to every movement you make as you drive, but it does seem like it's important to pay attention to at least the few steps that you need to take. I think there are analogies to this in sports. So the philosopher David Papineau writes really interestingly, unfortunately it's a cricket example, so it may not make any sense to an American audience, but think about games of strategy where there's a difference between playing aggressively and playing defensively. I mean, this can apply, for example, in tennis too. If you're not focused on strategy, one thing that can sometimes happen, I think does sometimes happen, is that people kind of slip out of their strategy. They kind of forget, in a sense, what they're supposed to be doing. And the reason for that is that the unconscious system has a kind of a mind of its own if it's not kept in check. If you're not reminding the unconscious system what it's supposed to be doing, it doesn't always cooperate and do what you want it to do. And so certainly in games that involve open skills, like cricket and tennis, it seems that this element of focus is super important. One thing that's interesting to me is that gymnastics and weightlifting, they're more closed skills. There's not such an obvious role for strategy. And yet it does. You've both talked about ways in which, as you perform the routine, you do nevertheless have to focus on one or two key cues. And I find that super interesting. It's almost as if you still need that focus to keep the unconscious system on track and do what you want it to do.
Now, you've been asking us a lot of questions, and I appreciate that because, it gets us thinking a little bit about the application of what we did as athletes and to think a little bit more about, whether or not there was any rhyme or reason to some of the things that we did. But I'm curious from the studies that you've done and from your research, whether or not there are concrete ways that maybe us as athletes or the people that are listening can actually try to activate the unconscious vision more than maybe what they're doing right now. Are there anything that you found, or there's any research showing if you do these types of things, whether it be repetition or whatever it might be, that we can pass along or be able to say, hey, let's try this in the gym. Let's try this with a movement that's been a challenge for you and try to move from a more heavily conscious type of approach to more of an unconscious approach, keeping some kind of balance between the two, because we know that they're important to be working simultaneously. But curious whether or not you have anything that seems to be effective in terms of application.
Absolutely. So it seems to me that what you want is your conscious and unconscious systems to be working in sync with each other. And I kind of feel like that is what people mean when they talk about being in the zone. I don't really believe that being in the zone is a matter of turning off conscious thought and concentration and just letting the unconscious systems operate absent-mindedly. I don't think that can be it. It's about having the systems work in sync. Obviously, training is just super important. So you have to shape the unconscious system through repetitive training. There's no way around that. But I'm quite interested in what you should do with consciousness. What should consciousness be doing? And one of the themes that you just see again and again in the empirical literature is that consciousness is limited in its capacity. Let me try to give one example of that. So people are asked to choose which apartment they would like. And they're given a list of apartments. And when they've only got a few desiderata to choose between, like how much the apartment is and which area the apartment is in, thinking about it consciously results in choices that people are happy with weeks later. But if you give them a list of 16 characteristics, and you ask people to think consciously about which apartment they would prefer, and then you ask them 2 weeks later, do you regret their choice? They're much more likely to regret it. Whereas if they went with their gut, they like their choice. They tend to like their choice better. So the moral seems to be, if you're using consciousness, don't overload it with too many factors. But it also seems like if you don't use it at all, you might be losing an opportunity. Maybe I could give one last example. I use this with my students, and this is moving from the sporting context to the context of writing academic papers, which is, I guess, what I and my students spend a lot of time doing. But if you only use conscious vision, conscious cognition, if you only use conscious thinking, you're robbing yourself of the chance to let your unconscious reasoning system go to work on the problem you're thinking about. But if you only use unconscious thinking, if you never clearly concentrate on the problem that you've been set, then you fail to give your unconscious system an objective, a directive. So the general advice is to do those two things in concert. You need to, in the academic paper example, start by thinking very hard about the problem, getting clear on the objectives, and then stop thinking about it and let the unconscious system do its work. And I think in a way that fits with the way you guys have described how you approach a lift or a routine. You start by focusing on one or two key cues, and that lets the unconscious systems then click into action. And they click into action in the way that they've been programmed to do through repetitive training. But maybe if you didn't focus attention on one of those one or two key cues, maybe the unconscious system wouldn't have clicked into action in quite the way you trained it to do.
Yep. I love it. Yeah, I think it matches up perfectly with what we're saying. And it's really exciting to hear, someone with your background and you being a teacher of philosophy to say those things. It's exciting. I could sit here and talk about this for a lot longer. We're going to get you out of here pretty quick. And before we do, what I'd like to hear from you, Declan, is, you just came from Power Monkey Camp, and what we're doing there is we're teaching movement, right? We're coaching, but we're teaching movement as well. So for you as a professor, as a teacher yourself, how did you feel about our teaching style, the way that we're teaching? And then also, is there anything that you learned from that as a teacher? And also, what can we learn from you as a teacher? Is there something that you do as a college professor that we could maybe apply in our teaching as well?
I certainly found myself learning a lot. I will have to think more about the question, what I might have to teach you guys. I suspect I have more to learn from you than the other way around. But there were two things that really struck me. I mean, one is the focus on the fundamentals of sound technique. And it's so important for me as someone who's coming into fitness from a relatively sedentary lifestyle to focus on fundamentals of movement. I mean, if you're the sort of person who's sat in a chair for too long, you're probably going to have anterior pelvic tilt. And that's not going to help you in your handstand. It's not going to help you in your jerk. So just having that focus on sound bodily position, I think, is so important for all sport and also for health and longevity in life. So that's one thing I picked up. And I think that focus on sound technique and fundamentals is really important. The other thing is really just about the inclusive way that you guys teach. One thing that Chris Hinshaw said stuck with me, which is that when he's coaching elite athletes for competition, rather than pointing out a flaw in their performance, he'll find a way for them to figure out the flaw and correct it. Why? Because if he just tells them you're not very good at X, it's gonna impair their performance. And I noticed in various ways, so let me give one example. Cheryl Hayworth, Olympic bronze medalist, was watching me jerk. And my jerk is not great, but I don't usually hit myself in the chin. But when Cheryl was standing next to me, I did. I jerked the bar right into my chin, and I felt like a complete idiot. But Cheryl, being a terrific teacher, rather than kind of making me feel bad about it, says, yeah, you're getting pop. I don't care that it hit your chin. What I like in that is the pop. And if you just get your chin out the way, it's going to move up quicker. And I could give similar examples from pretty much every coach I worked with. The fact is that helps someone like me to learn. So I think I would just say this is an important thing for all educators to remember. If you want people to perform well, it helps to kind of find the value in what they're doing and to make them feel good about it, rather than just criticize it in a negative way. And certainly all of the coaches at Power Monkey really exemplified that in a way that landed for me. I felt it.
We've talked about that a lot, Chad, haven't we? We talked about having coaches in our past who coach in different styles, right? People that coached with negativity, people that coached with positivity, people who were present, who were not present, physically and mentally as well, coaching wise. And I've always felt that I've succeeded the most with coaches that coached through positivity, through encouragement, through turns, and not focusing so much on what you can't do, but focusing much more on what you can do from turn to turn, from day to day. And I think we all try to do that. It's not something that, Chad and I preach the other coaches to do. I think we just try to bring in coaches that automatically do that and recognize that, the people that we're working with will benefit much more from that type of a style. And the other thing that I think we really want to get across is that, we recognize the importance of your time. And Chris actually always talks about this too, and I always appreciated it for it, that you're not training to go to the Olympics. You're not training to be the next elite athlete in gymnastics or weightlifting. You're doing this because you really enjoy it. And you found it later in life, and it's become a part of your life to become more fit and healthier and challenge yourself in new ways. And we want to facilitate that growth. We want to facilitate your enjoyment within this new, fitness endeavor. We're not there to beat you down and make it feel like it's a chore, or make you feel like, you have to do it. You want to do it. And we want to kind of facilitate that. And so I'm really glad that came across in your experience with the coaches, because it's something that I personally try to do with everyone that I work with. And I think that every other coach is. So the fact that it actually happened means that in my mind, we're doing something right with the way that we're coaching people at camp. So that's great to hear.
Absolutely. I mean, it contributes, I think, to an atmosphere of joy. I mean, when you're at camp, everyone is just having fun. It's just so fun. And people are at all kinds of different levels. I mean, there are, some pretty impressive athletes, and, there are people who are earlier in their fitness journey, and no one's judging people. Everyone is pursuing excellence and getting better. And it's just a joyful atmosphere.
Yep, at their own pace, all that kind of stuff is important to us. So I love it. You're making me nostalgic for camp now too. And we just got back a week ago, and I'm already missing it again. So
I'm ready to be back. I'm ready to be back for sure. But and that's the thing that really Power Monkey, I mean, we've done we're on camp 15, so we've been to 14 since we missed the one, but 14 camps have really given us, especially the ones, I mean, all the coaches are so good, but for me personally, it's made me a much better coach, because we regularly have athletes in there that are within a group of people that have been snatching and clean and jerking for 5, 10, 15 years. And then one or two people in the same group that have never done a snatch before. So you better be able to, say things in certain ways and appeal to a group of people that have different backgrounds and different amounts of experience, and they all benefit from the session at the same time. So so thankful that all the coaches that we have are able to do that. And as you said, Dave, it comes across that way. And let me just say something about Chris. He is absolutely a conversational wizard. I'll have conversations with him. I've had enough with him where I know what he's doing to me. He's trying to get me to come up with an idea and say something. And I know I'm being tricked and pulled into it, but I still go with it, just because he's so good, because I can't get out of it. Right. He's so good. And he makes you feel good about what you're saying. And he gets a lot accomplished that way. He's an incredible coach, and thankful that he is a part of the team as well.
So go ahead, Declan.
Oh, just interesting thinking about that ability of coaches to coach to a group of differing ability levels. I think, there are two aspects to that. One is that all of the coaches are interested in every athlete as an individual. But also there's this expertise. There's this amazing ability for people to just see in a moment what that one cue is. So, for example, Mike Serbus could see I was pushing my head forward in my overhead squat. And just by correcting my head position, suddenly I could do an overhead squat for the first time. So it's that expertise, which connects up with our earlier conversation. Like Mike's, and all of your unconscious visual systems are just tuned in through years of expertise and repetition to the things that matter. And, you can't get that everywhere.
It's not easy to do. And I think it comes from, like you said, years and years of actually coaching these movements. And it's something important to note too, because sometimes we have expectations of CrossFit coaches or other coaches that are coaching a variety of different modalities and sports to be able to be experts in so many different things. And it's fairly unrealistic. So the goal is to try to find someone who's fairly competent within that as an athlete who wants to become better. Find a coach who really knows that sport well, is willing to continuously learn and continuously work with people in person, because it's what's going to allow them to be able to make the change from you to Chad in a split second. You have a group of 10 to 15 people and you can pick out exactly what each person needs to do from turn to turn. That's something that takes years and years to be able to find, the slight correction, the slight change that's going to allow that person to make a better turn the next time around. So again, just something that we kind of pride ourselves on in terms of our ability to do that. And I appreciate you recognizing the coach's ability level there.
Yeah.
We have a couple like last minute questions, but I just want to ask you one more thing in terms of your own pursuit of fitness right now. You've taken this last year to kind of pursue some new things, and I'm curious whether or not you've been able to recognize how you're using your conscious and your unconscious within a specific training session, or how you're going into each session. We've talked about, us as elite athletes, but you who are so involved with the science behind it and the philosophy behind it, have you actually been able to implement any of these things yourself, or is this still kind of nebulous because you're still kind of in this learning phase?
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely noticed a tendency early on to think too much. So reminding myself not to overload consciousness with too many cues, just to focus on one or two things. But, because I'm at an earlier stage, I think there are other aspects of mindset that I've had to wrestle with. I mean, for example, my mobility is restricted. And so, I've just had to resign myself to the fact that that's a slow journey. And I'm now at the point where, I enjoy it. I just enjoy working on mobility regularly and seeing the slow and incremental progress. I mean, for example, now I can do an overhead squat. That wasn't true a few months ago. And I remember talking with my coach, Drew Dillon, and saying, look, I'm not sure if I'll ever be able to do an overhead squat, but that's okay. I don't mind just doing power snatches for the rest of my life. But secretly on the inside, feeling kind of sad, crushed by that idea. So for me, some of the learning has to do with that aspect of mindset, self-acceptance. I'm not as mobile as I was when I was 20, and I'm cool with it. I'm just, but I want to get better, and so I'm trying to think about ways to get better, but without holding myself to an artificially high standard, which is then going to discourage me. Those are the kinds of mindset issues that I've had to wrestle with. I mean, I'm the sort of person, I'm driven, I drive myself in my work. And when I used to do sport, I drove myself in it. And so now coming back to sport, I suppose I'm exploring a different side of myself, where I try to pursue excellence, but in a way that's a little kinder to myself.
Yeah, I would say that probably most people that we come across and that we work with are in similar shoes. So to hear your viewpoint on it is probably something that's more applicable to that person starting new on a movement, and to be able to get your viewpoint on it probably resonates a little bit more with them, as opposed to getting our viewpoint of what it's like to compete in the highest tier level of our individual sport,
Yeah, and let me just add to that, because as I'm listening to you describe where you're at mobility wise and everything else, Delkin, I can say that the way that you express that, the listeners will take it as that you're very tight and it's going to be impossible for you to ever snatch or clean well. And that's not the case. Your mobility is actually not too bad, but that goes to the point with what we're talking about, mindset and consciousness. And I think most athletes, especially if you're in the CrossFit community and you're willing to come to something like Power Monkey Camp, you're probably a person that's a little or a lot too hard on yourself. Right. And so I think that's another part of it too, is just understanding what that line is. Yes, we want to push ourselves. Yes, we want to have high standards, make sure those standards are right. And, try to be as realistic with yourself as you can. You got to push, but give yourself credit for those small wins that you get. Like you talked about our teaching and coaching styles, is that, hey, you know what, you did this really well, but let's work on this. That's something that a way that we always word things. And I think that's natural for us. And I think that we as athletes ourselves need to do that to ourselves as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I'm thinking back to what I just said. I think of myself as an immobile person.
Yeah.
And that seems to be holding me back in the snatch. Like when I'm actually relaxing and putting my body in better positions, I'm hitting the position better. So that kind of self-talk, it's like my mobility is improving. It's getting better.
Hey, that front squat, I worked with you. I worked with you on the front squat there for a while, and it was looking very, very good. I mean, I'm always my goal for every athlete is to get them to look and move like an elite lifter. And if I, really realistically compared your position to an elite lifter's front squat, I mean, you're more than 95% there, man. I mean, awesome. On a front squat. So don't sell yourself short there. And I think that's a good lesson for everyone to take in as well.
I got to tell you, Chad, I squatted yesterday, and man, am I feeling comfortable in that bottom position.
Well, you know what words I want to hear, don't you?
Oh my God. He's going to go to bed so happy tonight hearing that.
Yes.
So comfortable and so powerful. Like I have no doubt I'm going to be PRing my squat in a matter of weeks. No question.
Look at you. Well, exactly what I want to hear.
That leads to our question here. And I'm hoping that maybe it'll get swayed, but what sport or discipline do you prefer, weightlifting or gymnastics?
I've listened to a few of these podcasts, and I know weightlifting is the underdog, so I'm giving a vote to weightlifting today. I love.
Oh, because you feel bad for Chad. All right.
Yeah. Hey, I'll take. You know what? I don't even care. I'll take it. I'm fine with that. Give me a sympathy vote. That's fine.
I love both sports, and man, watching gymnastics, what a spectacle. But if I vote as an athlete, I guess weightlifting is kind of more of an integral part of my life. I hope the gymnastics plays a gretter role, but I've taken a huge amount from weightlifting, and
I love it.
I give it some love. I got to give some love to it.
Love it. Question 2. Any particular guest that you think? I actually want to have you on again, so we can definitely have you part 2. But any other particular guests that you think would be great to have on that you've come across in your teachings or anything like that would be a good guest for us?
Oh, good question. Have you had Lindsay Shoup on? I know she's one of your coaches.
We have not had Lindsay on yet.
We need to.
Yeah, we definitely should get Lindsay on. Absolutely.
I want to read her book. And she's another person who comes to mind when I talk about that inclusive spirit. I mean, Lindsay is an Olympic gold medalist, but she's very self-deprecating when she talks about her past. She discovered rowing, I think, at college, so she came to it relatively late. She says she was lacking in confidence, she was overweight, but she's the best. She became the best in the world at what she did. That's an incredibly inspiring story. I'd love to hear more about that.
It's a great one. We got to get her on the agenda, Chad.
Yeah, that's a great recommendation for sure. And looking for other recommendations here. We're always asking about a book, and you can give us a recommendation. But I also want you to remind us what the title of your book is and where people can find that.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So this is my book. This is The Epistemic Role of Consciousness. It's really written for an academic audience. So I mention it with some caution, but I do have a couple of things, if there are any listeners who are interested in thinking more about conscious and unconscious systems in the brain. There's in particular this book, Sight Unseen, by David Milner and Melvin Goodale. They're psychologists and neuroscientists in Canada and Britain, respectively. That's a very good, accessible book about conscious and unconscious systems in the brain. And maybe if I was just going to add one more, I want to give a plug to David Papineau's book, Knowing the Score. It's really a book on the philosophy of sport. Really engaging, really fun. And some of the ideas that we've been discussing today, I basically have been poaching from David's terrific book. So that'd be a great one for people who are keen on sport but want to think about philosophical angles on sport.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. And man, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on here. And we say this a lot. We got to have you back on. We say that to so many of our guests.
Love it.
Because they're so good. But I mean, there's so much more that we could talk about there. I mean, I've got a list of questions here that we didn't get to. And I know that Dave did as well. But it was a pleasure to meet you and get to know you at camp and to continue that relationship here. And any plans to come back to camp in the future?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'll be back for sure. No question.
Awesome. Well, we look forward to seeing you there. And before we get you out of here, any parting words or anything else you want to share with the audience?
No, thanks to you both. I mean, as I say, I've learned so much from attending camp, and I'm honored to be a guest here, and I look forward to continuing the conversation with you both.
Awesome. Well, as always, to our listeners, guys, be sure to head over to powermonkeyfitness.com for services and upcoming events. Also, check out our Instagram pages for regular teaching and technical content at Power Monkey Fitness, at Dave Durante, and at Ollie Chad. And on behalf of Power Monkey Fitness, we're your host. I'm Chad Vaughn with Dave Durante. And until next time, guys, thank you all for listening.